Hello! I've decided to make this Archaeo-Scope video following my recent visit to York. Yesterday I was in the city, and if you've just watched my update video you'll be up to date on how that trip went. But I want to talk in this video about the dark side of the heritage sector in York. York is a beautiful city, and it's a city which is intrinsically linked and connected very directly to its past, in many ways in a very artificial way actually. The reason why York is such a chocolate box city is because heavy taxes were going to be enacted on new industry which moved into the city. The reason why York didn't go along the lines of Sheffield with the steel, or Leeds or other urban areas in that part of the world is because York said, no, we want to keep our city looking pristine and beautiful, essentially because of its tourist industry, and therefore we will tax new businesses. And this is the reason why you have streets like the Shambles, why you have good old-fashioned little shops still to this day in York. So York's always had a heritage industry and a heritage sector. For the past couple of hundred years really, and this continues today with the likes of the Jorvik Viking Centre, the Minster itself and its wonderful new exhibition down below in the Undercroft, the Yorkshire Museum, which has recently had a refit, and actually some friends of Archaeo-Scope, Glass Cannon, did some work in exhibitions there. And all across the city there's a smattering of heritage-related interests, shops, museums, educational opportunities, activities, so on and so forth. So in this sense, York is driven very much by an engine which is probably, I'd say, fueled by history and heritage tourism. It's one of the most visited places outside of London, if not, I think, probably the most visited city outside of London in Britain for this reason. Now, the dark side to which I'm referring, though, is something which used to bother me when I lived and worked in York. And this is on the street called Stonegate, and also on the Shambles, the two most visited and most popular streets in York. It is possible to purchase archaeology. And yesterday when I was wandering around with my tourist hat on, essentially, with my camera around my neck, looking full-on touristy, I saw an opportunity to finally record and highlight a problem which has been bothering me since I lived and worked there, and has continued to bother me since then. So what I saw in a particular shop, I won't name the shop for fear of some legal repercussions, but it's a shop on Stonegate, and they sell antiques. And what happens when you go in, on the left-hand side, there's a whole wall, essentially, of antiquities, as opposed to antiques. These are ancient antiques, ancient objects, ancient curios, I suppose. And they're all boxed and labelled, and they're very much being sold to you as you go in. And they range from truly ancient things like Mesolithic arrowheads, all the way through to Roman artefacts. For example, there's a Tudor leather purse, supposedly anyway, on sale. And often these objects are labelled very rare, and this adds to the price. They also come with a certificate of authenticity, which is not really something which museums or archaeologists provide, but nonetheless apparently they do, highlighting that clearly a real old thing is desirable, and therefore people want to purchase genuine antiques and antiquities. So it's a slightly disturbing sight for an archaeologist. The reason why it's so disturbing is because what you're seeing is, as Flinders Petrie might have said, is murdered evidence. You're seeing objects which have been more or less removed from their context, been given a very loose date in many instances, and have been very poorly described. For example, arrowheads from the Stone Age. That means nothing. And so what you're seeing actually are a bunch of objects which have been removed from their cultural context, their physical context, and no longer are any use to anyone who's serious about history, other than simply collecting things together. And therefore it's a very sad thing to see, and this is happening on, as I say, one of the most visited streets in Britain, basically, if not the world. And it's really quite unfortunate. Now, I posted a photo of this on Archaeo-Scope's Facebook page yesterday, and this started quite a debate. People were talking about the issue, and initially, one of the most common reactions was basically blame. People blamed, for example, metal detectorists, and went, "Well, these folk, they go out there and they just dig up stuff, and they don't care about anything. They sell it on. They're criminals, they're heartless people." But not all of these finds actually were metal. In fact, most of them, I would say, weren't. Many of them were ceramic, leather in the case of the Tudor purse. So metal detectorists doesn't quite cover it. And also as well, not all metal detectorists are bad folk. Often they will stick to laws that they have to. They will often be associated with archaeological units, so that you can get good ones who, for example, will detect in the spoil heap, see if you've missed anything vital. And also, in this country, good metal detectorists are governed by, for example, the Portable Antiquities Scheme, and they'll try and report their finds in the way which is requested of them. Well then, people say, well, in that case you need to blame the Portable Antiquities Scheme, because if it wasn't for that law, or these laws, so this structure which encourages people to find objects and to dig them out of the ground randomly, then it wouldn't be happening. But that's not true. The Portable Antiquities Scheme in Britain was set up because people were just finding things and selling things randomly, and it was decided it was much better to record them as they turned up in a way which was useful to archaeologists, historians, other interested groups, rather than just losing this data, this information and these objects to the ether. In this way, in a structured way, objects can be found, they can be reported and logged, and yes, they can be sold to museums or other interested groups. But the point is, everyone wins, rather than everyone except the metal detectorist and maybe the collector winning, losing rather, and just those guys winning. So the PAS actually is a red herring. People often blame that, especially people from other countries, but that's because they don't understand what the Portable Antiquities Scheme actually does, and the wonderful success that they've had in the past few years in terms of the amount of objects that are being logged now, which wouldn't have been. It kind of highlights just how bad the problem has been over the past few years. There's also the people often the reaction was well, it should be illegal. It should be illegal to do this stuff. And in many instances, many of these objects were coming from countries where it was demonstrably illegal. For example, someone was saying that in Greece, it's absolutely illegal to dig up and manage and handle and sell on ancient artifacts. But what I saw yesterday appeared to be in some instances objects from ancient Greece. So that it's illegal doesn't stop it from happening. And there we have we had certainly metallurgy from ancient Greece. Upsetting to see, but the argument of, well, make it illegal doesn't stop it. And in some ways, the PAS, I would say, is a great way of managing that trade which is going to occur anyway. Now, there were some attempts at assuaging, I suppose, the wave of anger which was coming towards this photo, and people were saying, well, they may well be fake. Those objects may not be real. But the fact of the matter is, they came with this certificate of authenticity. So at best, the shops involved, were committing fraud. They're saying to the customers, these are real, when they're not. But at worst, actually, what they are actually doing, even if they are fake, is that they're propagating the idea that it's okay to sell antiquities with a really dodgy provenance and essentially with a really loose interpretation, just for the sake of having things. So even if they are fake objects, they're still promoting the trade indirectly, and they're certainly not helping other archaeological sites which are being looted all the time, being left scarred and pit marked by looters. So even if these objects are fake, that's no excuse. But there's also another thing as well that this implies, and that is, well, the certificate really shows that people want the real deal. They want actual historical artifacts. So again, even if the objects are fake, they're actually feeding a market. They're feeding the demand from people for genuine antiquities, and people who obviously don't care all that much about their provenance or necessarily about their cultural value. So yeah, that's a bit of a dodgy one, saying they may be fake. The fact of the matter is they're being sold under the understanding that they're real. And actually, as an archaeologist, I was there, I saw them, they looked pretty darn real. And it's all promoting this illicit trade, I would say. This, very dodgy, if not illegal in some parts of the world, trade. Someone else said, well, they all probably know that they're fake. It's like they're buying props, essentially, sort of, the historical curios, which aren't really real. But again, that's not the case. Their value is based upon their age, very clearly in these instances. And again, the certificate of authenticity is there to show the buyer that they can have confidence in the artifact. So again, the people are either being duped, or they're being encouraged to continue to buy artifacts. Again, they don't really divert the distasteful nature of this trade. Fake or not, it's still encouraging it. Still encouraging the perception on one of the most popular streets in all of Britain, if not the world. Tourists are being given the impression that, oh yeah, you can just buy artifacts and divorce them from their cultural context. Now, there's also another argument to be made here, and that is, or another, I suppose, excuse, if you will, and that is, well, museums can't take all of this stuff in, museums often are crammed, and there are at the moment, for example, county archives, which are so full that they can't afford to take on anything else as it stands. So in some ways, perhaps such trade is helping to thin out the unnecessary or the other aspects of archaeological detritus, which otherwise would be filling up already full museums. But again, that's not necessarily the case. In many instances, we can't accurately trace where these objects and artifacts are coming from. Therefore, we can't trace, in many ways, yes, okay, their cultural value, but also we have no idea whether they're coming from actually sites that haven't been dug yet. So, yeah, sure, they may well potentially be seen if they are extra to data. If they are just floating around and museums can't take them in, then they should be left in the ground, and they shouldn't be taken out of the ground. And they certainly shouldn't be taken from sites which haven't been disturbed yet, if you see what I mean. So again, it's a bit of a false argument, the idea, well, they're extra, they're floating around, might as well sell them. You can't have them all museums. Well, in that case, they shouldn't be floating around then. In my opinion, anyway. Now, I'm sure there'll be a range of opinions out there, and really, I just thought I'd just take this opportunity to highlight this trade. I've already talked about it a little bit in my A to Z of archaeology when we did look at illicit archaeology. But it continued to bother me when I was living there, and it has continued to bother me since. And I thought I'd take the opportunity to highlight these issues, to highlight my thoughts on them. All of my thoughts, as you can see, they're not particularly on both sides of the fence. I'm very much against the trade, very much against divorcing artifacts from their cultural and physical context, and also very much against promoting this trade, fake or real. It's still a promotion of the idea of the illicit trade in artifacts from unknown sites from across the world. But there will be counterpoints to this, and I've attempted to present a couple of those. The idea of, for example, museums can't have all the objects, or maybe fake objects are being sold, and that's better. Perhaps it is. I don't think it is. But what do you think? So really, I'd really love to hear back from you. As I've said previously, this series is about questions, not answers. So please do have a discussion below. I'd love to hear more about what people think about this trade, especially people who aren't necessarily archaeologists themselves. Is it okay? Is it right that people can be given this impression when they go to such a famous historical city, and in the heart of that city is a festering little, dirty little trade, essentially, this little secret? Or am I over-dramatising it? Is it just stuff? It's just stuff, Mark, it's fine. It's floating around, just leave it be. I don't know. But let's see what you guys think below. Please do comment. If any arguments break out, keep them civil. But I really would love to hear more about this, because it's a very complicated situation, and in many instances it is literally very much damaging archaeology and our ability to understand sites which haven't been dug yet. So it's a very controversial, complicated situation. And also in some parts of the world, people depend on this trade actually to feed their family, because they can't farm the land perhaps, but they've got a site next door that they can dig up. Very complicated. Anyway, your thoughts below, I'd very much appreciate them. I'm going to get on with other things, actually. In fact, yesterday I learned a very interesting fact which I'm going to make an artifacts on, which I'll probably publish today. So, until next time guys, take care. Bye bye.